Welcome to Echo of Crime YouTube channel. The Blue Motel sat quietly at the edge of Flagstaff, Arizona, the kind of place travelers stopped at when they were too tired to drive any farther. It was old, faded, and mostly forgotten, except by the people who worked there. But on the morning of April 4th, 2014, something happened that none of them could forget. Housekeeper Maria Lopez pushed her cleaning cart down the second-floor hallway, starting her routine at room 205, a room marked in the system as vacant. As she approached the door, she stopped. A bright blue motel key lay on the carpet, right in front of the doorframe, as if someone had dropped it while unlocking the room. The problem was simple and strange. No one should have been staying in room 205. The motel used digital keycards, not old metal keys. Only 6 blue keys still existed, and all of them were locked away in the manager's office. Maria frowned, picked up the key, and gently pushed the door open. It wasn't just unlocked, it was locked from the inside. That was impossible. The room smelled faintly of cold air, like someone had just stepped out. On the desk sat a wallet, an ID card, and a phone with no signal. The name on the ID, Daniel Mercer, a traveler who had officially checked out 3 days earlier. Maria's hands shook as she backed out of the room and called her manager. Minutes later, Manager Paul Grayson arrived, pale and confused. "We cleaned this room after he left," he said. "Nobody has been in here." He moved slowly through the room, noticing little things that didn't belong: a second coffee cup, a jacket that wasn't in the lost and found, and the window slightly open, even though the security latch was still in place. There was no sign of forced entry. No sign of a break-in. No reason for a locked room to be unlocked. Paul turned to Maria. "Call the police." 20 minutes later, 2 officers from the Flagstaff Police Department arrived. They examined everything: the wallet, the bed, the window, the bathroom, and recorded every detail. When Officer Lynn checked the front desk computer, she confirmed something unsettling. Daniel Mercer had checked out on April 1st. The door had never been reopened using any employee keycard. So how did the room unlock? Who left the blue key? And why were Daniel's belongings back inside? Officer Lynn asked to see the hallway camera footage. The staff gathered around the tiny monitor at the reception desk as the footage rewound to the night before. The hallway was empty, silent, motionless, until 3:12 a.m. A shadow passed in front of room 205. Not a full body. Not a visible person. Just a shadow sliding across the floor, even though no one walked through the entrance lobby at that time. The officers exchanged a look. "This isn't a malfunction," Lynn said quietly. "Someone was here." But the biggest shock came when the officers tried to trace the Blue Motel key. It didn't belong to Daniel. It didn't match any employee key. And it wasn't registered in the motel's old logbooks. The Blue Motel had no record of who that key belonged to. And that was only the beginning. Detectives Lynn Carter and Evan Torres returned to the Blue Motel later that afternoon with a single goal: trace the mysterious blue key. It was the only physical clue that didn't make sense: an outdated metal key in a building that hadn't used metal keys for nearly 8 years. When Paul, the manager, opened the motel's old storage cabinet, he took out a small blue box holding the last remaining backup keys. Inside were 5 keys. The 6th was the one Maria found in the hallway. "This key shouldn't be outside this box," Paul said quietly. Detective Torres examined the key's teeth and grooves. It had scratches, recent ones, suggesting it had been used within the last 24 hours. But the motel's old lock system had been disabled long ago. The door to room 205 didn't even work with metal keys anymore. Only digital keycards were supported. So how did a metal key open a digital lock? That was the first major red flag. Torres and Lynn pulled the door lock off the frame. Inside the mechanism, they found something unusual: a small metal override latch that looked bent, as if someone had forced it gently with a thin object. Not broken, just pushed. Someone knew exactly how to bypass the modern lock quietly. Someone experienced. Back in the manager's office, the detectives reviewed Daniel Mercer's checkout record again. Everything seemed normal. He turned in his keycard, paid his balance, and left alone. But his phone records added a twist. Daniel's phone had pinged off a tower right behind the motel 3 hours after he checked out. Then his signal stopped. Detective Lynn scribbled in her notebook. He never actually left the area. They checked the motel's exterior cameras, the ones facing the parking lots. A clear shot showed Daniel walking to his car, opening the driver's door, then closing it again without getting in. He walked behind the building, out of camera range. The footage ended there. Where did he go after this? Torres asked. The motel staff stayed silent. No one had seen him. Then a call came from the police lab. They had lifted prints from the blue key. 4 prints belonged to Daniel, but one didn't. The unknown print didn't match any motel employee, any registered guest, or anyone in the criminal database. But it did match another set, a smudged fingerprint found under room 205's window latch. Someone had opened the window from the outside. Detective Lynn returned to the room and stood where the intruder may have climbed in. The window was old and low, easy access from the narrow ledge running along the building's second floor. Lynn whispered, someone watched him. As she inspected the carpet near the desk, she noticed another detail overlooked earlier. A faint footprint, mostly wiped away, but still visible under angled sunlight. It was from a shoe size larger than Daniel's. Someone else had been inside the room after his checkout. Someone who knew how to get in without cameras seeing him. But the case notes revealed something stranger. Room 205 wasn't the only room with unexplained entries. Room 207 had a tampered window latched 2 months earlier. Room 212 had a digital lock failure during a storm. Room 203 reported missing items left behind by guests. All on the same hallway. All with unexplained access. Detective Lynn closed her notebook. This isn't random, she said. Someone's been entering these rooms for months. And for the first time, the mystery of the Blue Motel key didn't seem like an isolated incident. It felt like part of a pattern no one had noticed, until now. Detectives Lynn and Torres returned the next morning with a clearer picture of the case. The blue key, the window latch, the unknown print, all signs pointed to someone who knew the building well. Someone who understood the motel's weaknesses better than anyone. They began interviewing past employees. A former night clerk mentioned something chilling. There used to be a man who lived around here, drifted in and out. He knew the motel's layout like the back of his hand. We fired him for stealing a guest's wallet. Name was Travis. Detective Torres flipped through old documents until he found a termination form. Travis G. Hartman, former maintenance assistant. He had access to every room before the motel switched to digital locks. But there was a problem. Travis had disappeared 8 months earlier. As the detectives dug deeper, they realized the old handwritten maintenance logs were missing. Someone had removed entire months of entries, specifically from the time Travis worked there. The missing months matched the timeline of the unexplained room incidents. Torres looked at Lynn. He never really left this place, did he? The next breakthrough came when a nearby gas station clerk recognized Daniel Mercer's photo. The clerk had seen Daniel arguing with a tall man wearing a dark flannel jacket, similar to what Travis had been described wearing during his employment. Detective Lynn checked Daniel's phone again. The last message he sent at 1:57 a.m. was to a friend. Something weird at this motel. Think someone followed me. That message was never opened. The detectives returned to room 205 one last time. Lynn studied the window again, running her fingers along the sill. She crouched down and noticed something tiny wedged between the carpet and the wall, a torn piece of flannel fabric, barely visible in the shadows. Torres, look at this. They packaged the fabric and sent it to the lab. Hours later, the results came in. The fiber matched a jacket worn by an unidentified man captured on a convenience store camera 3 blocks from motel, the same week Daniel went missing. Torres paced before the monitor. It's him. Travis was inside the room. But the biggest revelation came from the unreleased case notes. Local hikers had reported a man living in an abandoned shed near the interstate, leaving behind blankets, food wrappers, and motel keys, including 2 blue ones identical to the key found in room 205. Investigators believe Travis had been secretly entering random rooms at night, taking small valuables and slipping out windows without being detected. When Daniel returned to his room late that night to retrieve forgotten items, he likely startled Travis. The confrontation ended with Daniel fleeing the motel on foot. He was later found unconscious at a rest stop, disoriented and dehydrated. He remembered only one detail: a man standing inside my room holding a blue key. Detective Lynn closed the case file. It wasn't solved completely. Travis was never located, but the evidence painted a disturbing picture. A former maintenance worker who knew the camera angles. A man who could bypass locks without leaving a trace. A drifter slipping in and out of rooms for months. A stolen set of old motel keys that should have been locked away forever. And one victim who was lucky enough to survive the encounter. The final page of the case file said it clearly. Suspect: Travis G. Hartman. Status: unresolved. Blue Motel key remains preserved as critical evidence. To this day, room 205 remains empty, and the Blue Motel key stays locked in a police storage box, a reminder that some mysteries don't end with answers.